Lina, soy Sueli. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo con tu historia motivar a tantos jóvenes que están viendo tu ejemplo para que sigan haciendo descubrimientos como el que estás haciendo ahora, que bueno, puede cambiar la vida de mucha gente?
Oh, I love that question. I have two small children, and I get to work this every day. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. I think encouraging young people to get interested in science is as easy as playing in the kitchen or playing with Legos. The kitchen is a great place to play with science. My kids love baking, that's chemistry. They love making Easter eggs, that's chemistry. I think play is the key, because I think that we as humans do things we love to do. We know that it takes 15,000 hours of practice before we get good at anything, before we become masters. But usually we only like to do things for 15,000 hours if it's fun. So I think it's really important to encourage play. And I'm just grateful that my mom did that with us when we were kids. We played a lot with Legos and doing science experiments in the house. I also think it's important for us to recognize that, especially for young people, it's not like there's only one type of person who's good at science, or there's one type, that you can't be artistic and scientific at the same time. Look at this dancer who's also at this festival, dancing with robots. I mean, she's programming the robots and she's dancing with them. I think to encourage people that are interested in art to also be interested in science, and people who are interested in science to also be interested in art. I think that we don't have to be only one kind of person, and I think that helps people get more interested when they don't feel like they're trapping themselves in a path that might not feel like it makes sense to them. I hope that helps. I'm trying to live this right now with my family, and I hope it pays off.
Hola Nina, Leticia Campos de Todo Un Poco. Preguntarte, como mujer en la ciencia, ¿cuál es el obstáculo que enfrentas, primero como estudiante universitaria, para ser estudiante mujer en la ciencia, después como madre en la ciencia?
Well, I don't like to focus on that particular set of challenges in my day-to-day life, because I think it would make me sad. I like to focus on the things I'm grateful for, which are, like I said earlier in my talk, I am so grateful that my battles are different than my grandma's. Because humanity, we're animals. We don't, it takes a long time for us to change. And I think that we have seen a lot of change in the roles of women in society in the past 100 years, and that's only one human lifetime. So I try and remember that for people like my father-in-law who recently passed away, he said the biggest change he saw in his lifetime, and he was 90 or almost 90 when he passed, was the role of women in society. And I recognized, wow, in one human lifetime we saw so much change. So I try and focus on that. But when I think about, like, when I get sad, and the statistics that make me feel sad, like the number of times that I know I smile a lot, okay, but that doesn't mean I'm not a serious person. And I think women get punished more than men for being friendly. People think that we are the person serving coffee instead of the person running the company. And there have been many times when people assume that I'm my own assistant, as opposed to the person who, has raised $50 million and is running the freaking company, and nothing against, we all have roles to play, but I think women oftentimes get mistaken for not having the roles of authority. There's a gap in how we're perceived. In the venture capital community, there's a gap in how women are perceived versus men in terms of our potential versus risk. And this is something that I think we can overcome. A woman and a man can both be learning in their journey, But because of some of the unconscious biases that are in the venture capital community, being on a learning journey is seen as a risk, more often if you're a female entrepreneur, but it's seen more as a sign of potential for a male entrepreneur. And those kinds of subconscious biases are hard to fight because we're not conscious of them. But I'm hopeful, because look how far we've come in 100 years. I'm hopeful that if we make things visible, we can overcome them. And then as a mom, my goodness, my kids are at home right now with their dad, right? And I am enjoying this trip so much, but I feel separate from my family. And I have to make that sacrifice each time as a family. We make a decision of whether or not I'm gonna go to some place to give a talk, or some place to have a meeting with a prospective investor, or even some place where we might start a branch of our company, right? I think as a mother, and I think fathers feel this too, I think everyone feels this if they're a loving parent, is the push and pull between the fulfillment we get from changing the world through entrepreneurship and changing the world more locally through our family and our community. And they're all equally valid, but that tension is something that I think we as moms feel on ourselves, and in part because society expects so much from us as a kind of default parent. I think we sometimes put extra pressure on ourselves that way too. I'm very lucky in this regard that I married to a really great feminist who's very proud to be part of this journey with me and is very invested. But that's a challenge that is inside of me and is also in society. And I hope, my friends told me today on International Women's Day, that it's important to set an example, especially for our daughters, of a mom running around a little bit, being a little messy, not being perfect, and that she'll know, and my son too, they're gonna see me out there working, and that's gonna have an effect on them too, which will hopefully change their view about women in authority, women as risks versus potential, and all those other things. So I just, I like to focus on the parts that make me hopeful, but we're not there yet as a society, but I think many of us want to be. Everyone's happier. I heard someone say today, when we don't have equality with women and men, it's like society is a bird flying with only one wing. And when we fly with both wings, everybody's happier. So I see this as making progress in this manner is making progress for everybody, our kids, our grandparents, everybody. I think we all will survive, be happier people if we have more equality in this regard. I know that was a long answer, but thank you. It's part of the system. And I think that in this case, it was probably not the best use of brain-computer interfaces, because blindness is caused, in his case, by one single base pair deletion in his DNA. Now, when it comes to mobility, there is, again, a gap in the functionality of our nervous system. And that gap is one that I think, and we have seen with really promising data, can restore not just motion by replacing the electrical signals in the body with a chip, but actually that in so doing, those electrical signals encourage the body to repair. And so I think it's a really promising application of the technology that I'm excited to see how it develops in the future. Yeah, I wish them well. Yes, and thank you for that question, because I think we oftentimes, when we talk to entrepreneurs, we focus on the promise of the technology and not necessarily the difficult news. That there are a lot of challenges. And some of the challenges that I spoke about in my talk were around obviously developing the technology, making sure that it works in human, but then making sure it's affordable, scalable to manufacture, and that it not only works in our economy, but works in our culture. Because I think oftentimes scientists You know, I've seen a lot of science fiction movies, and replacement body parts are in Star Wars and in Marvel movies. I think we as a society believe that that's where the future is going. But just like science fiction can be positive or terrifying, so can the real world. So I think it's a real challenge for us to make sure that even if we build a technology that works, that people are going to want to use it. And so our challenges are economic and cultural, as well as technical. Thank you for that question. You know, the how of making something affordable is oftentimes where people with good intentions can get sidetracked. And I think where I'm focusing at the moment is on technologies like what we're seeing, you know, in this conference. The main drivers of cost in our field are that, you know, we're using human labor to make these tissues kind of artisanal. You know, it's very labor intensive. And by that token, the more we can automate the process and make our processes scalable for manufacturing, the more we can make sure that we can produce them at cost. And secondly, not just the cost, but we have to make sure that we're proving that our technologies drive outcomes that reduce societal costs. For example, if people can get back to work faster, they're going to be costing less to their family. If people are able to take fewer days off from work, they can be there to support their families, right? These are costs that matter to people, and they're increasingly getting measured in clinical trials to help make the case then for governments in the future and payers, because we live in a healthcare system where the end users are it's very complicated. The end users are the patients, the decision makers are the surgeons, the payers are governments and private insurers, and we have to make sure that a technology, if it's going to succeed, has to provide benefits to all of those people. So yes, governments and insurers are one very important stakeholder, and to the extent that we can get the right evidence of our technology working to drive outcomes that matter, and that we can do that affordably, I think that's the key. So, you know, we're focusing on the technology piece right now and making sure that in clinical trials we're proving the outcomes. But yeah, it's a long journey. It's going to be about 5 years from today.